Marcus had $11 in his pocket and a plain white t-shirt on his back, and within 18 hours he'd be standing in the same terminal wearing a different jacket, watching the woman who'd had him removed realize exactly whose name was on the building, watching the exact moment the certainty drained out of her face, and something closer to dread moved in behind it. Farah's voice, flat and final, cut across the lounge. "This is a private terminal," she said. "I think you'd be more comfortable somewhere else." Marcus Dayton stood at the glass doors of Redline Aviation's private terminal, a duffel bag over one shoulder, watching his own reflection look smaller than he felt against the polished floor behind it. To understand why the man who owned this building was standing outside it, with $11 and no reservation, we have to go back to a decision he made 3 weeks earlier, to see his own company the way a stranger would. Before we go any further, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Now let's begin. Redline Aviation operated out of a private terminal on the edge of Centennial Airport, 20 minutes south of downtown Denver, a low-glass building that served charter clients, who paid more for an hour of flight time than most people made in a month. The front range sat visible on clear days, through the terminal's floor-to-ceiling windows, snow still capping the higher peaks even in late spring, though that particular Tuesday the sky had gone the flat gray Colorado, sometimes settled into for days at a time. Marcus had built the company, from a single lease jet 14 years earlier, into a fleet of 9, and he'd made a habit, every few years, of walking through his own operations as an ordinary customer, unannounced, unrecognized, because a company's real character showed up clearest in how it treated someone who looked like they had nothing to offer it. He'd told his executive team about the practice exactly once, years ago, and never mentioned it again, since a habit that everyone knows about stops being a useful test. That Tuesday morning he'd driven himself to the terminal in a borrowed sedan, wearing a plain white t-shirt, dark jeans, and sneakers that weren't any recognizable brand, his hair neat, his face calm, carrying only a duffel bag and $11 in cash, deliberately leaving his wallet's other cards at home. The terminal lobby smelled like fresh coffee and leather upholstery, chandeliers throwing warm light across polished stone, guests moving through it in tailored coats, and shoes that had clearly never touched gravel. Marcus walked through the doors like he'd done it 1,000 times, because he had, just never dressed like this. He found a seat near the window in the lounge area, the mountains visible through the glass under a gray Colorado sky, and waited quietly, his duffel bag resting against his leg. Nobody came to offer him coffee. Nobody asked whether he needed anything. 2 minutes passed, then 5, servers moving briskly past his chair toward other guests, without so much as a glance in his direction. At the front desk, 23-year-old Priya Anand had been watching him since he walked in, 5 months into the job, and still learning the terminal's particular choreography, the invisible rules nobody wrote down, but everybody enforced anyway. She'd noticed, more than once in her short time there, that walk-in guests, without a name in the reservation system, got routed differently than everyone else, funneled toward a slower greeting, a longer wait, a more skeptical once-over, and she'd wondered privately whether that was actual policy or just something the senior staff had decided among themselves, without ever writing it down. Heels clicked across the stone floor, fast and deliberate. Farah Kessler, 36 years old, for years managing the VIP lounge, stopped at the edge of Marcus's seating area with a tablet in hand and looked at him the way you look at something that isn't supposed to be there. "Excuse me," she said. "Can I help you with something?" Marcus looked up. "I'm just waiting on a charter," he said. "Are you a registered client?" she asked. "No," he said. "Do you have a booking reference?" "No." Farah's eyes moved across him slowly, the t-shirt, the jeans, the sneakers, then back to his face. "Sir, this is a private terminal," she said. "Walk-ins are accommodated based on availability." She paused just long enough for the pause itself to mean something. "And suitability." Marcus didn't blink. "I'm suitable," he said. Farah smiled, the kind of smile that carried no warmth in it at all. "I think you'd be more comfortable somewhere else," she said. "You think I can't afford to be here," he said. She didn't deny it. "I think there are other options in the area better suited to," she started. To people who look like me, Marcus finished, his voice still quiet, not sharp, just clear. The lounge had gone still around them. A man 2 seats over lowered his newspaper slightly. A woman near the bar had stopped mid-sip. Farah straightened. That's not what I said, she said. It's what you meant, Marcus answered. The smile dropped from her face entirely. She turned and gestured toward 2 security officers stationed near the main doors. Please escort this gentleman out, she said. They came over without hesitation. Marcus stood slowly. He looked at Farah, not with anger, not with embarrassment, just a long, steady look she would remember later and wish she hadn't seen. You're doing this because of what I'm wearing, he said. I'm doing this because you don't have a reservation, she said, and because this is not the right place for you today. Something moved through his eyes fast, there and gone in the same second. Okay, he said quietly. The guards walked him out. The lounge watched. Some people looked away. Some didn't. From Priya's side of, that morning, the decision not to speak had felt less like cowardice and more like arithmetic done too fast to fully examine. 5 months of employment weighed silently against 4 years of Farah's standing in the building, a calculation that resolved itself before she'd consciously worked through the variables. She'd grown up watching her own father navigate rooms that decided things about him before he opened his mouth, watching him absorb it quietly the way you absorb something you've decided isn't worth the cost of fighting. And some small, stubborn part of her had promised herself years earlier that she'd be different when her turn came. Watching Marcus get walked out the door, she felt that promise fail in real time, and the shame of it sat heavier than she expected, until the moment she found herself moving toward the exit anyway, her feet deciding, before the rest of her had finished arguing about it. Priya had seen the whole thing, from the front desk, something tightening in her chest, as she watched a stranger get walked to the exit for the crime of sitting quietly by a window. She almost said something at the moment it happened, and didn't, the words catching somewhere behind her own uncertainty about whether a 5-month employee had any standing to question a 4-year manager in front of a lounge full of clients. Outside, Marcus stood on the sidewalk for a moment, cold mountain air moving past him, traffic noise from the access road behind him, looking back at the glass building and his own faint reflection in it. Hey, wait, a voice called. He stopped. Priya stood just outside the doors, her lanyard still around her neck, ID badge bouncing against her chest, looking like she'd just done something she couldn't undo. I'm sorry, she said. What happened in there? That was wrong. Marcus looked at her. You work here, he said. She nodded. Doesn't mean I agreed with it, she said. It wasn't your fault, he told her. Still felt like it was, she said. He studied her for a second, something in her face that wasn't pity or performance, just genuine discomfort at having witnessed something unjust and not known what to do with it in the moment. What's your name? He asked. Priya, she said. He nodded once and walked toward the parking area. She watched until he disappeared around the corner of the building. That night, Farah sat in her office reviewing the day's numbers, a small satisfaction sitting in her chest as she replayed the morning, telling herself she'd kept the lounge clean, maintained the standard. The standard, she repeated to herself, quieter, a word she'd used so many times it had started to lose its shape entirely. She closed her laptop and didn't think about him again. She should have. The next morning arrived cold and early, the terminal waking up in its usual sequence, floors polished, coffee brewing, aircraft being prepped on the tarmac beyond the glass. At 7 a.m., Operations Director Desmond Okafor called an all-staff meeting in the main conference room. We have an ownership visit today, he said. The room shifted uneasily. Unannounced walkthrough. Everything needs to be sharp. Who is it? Someone asked. Desmond checked his notes. Marcus Dayton, he said. The name landed like a dropped tray. 3 seconds of total silence. Then the room broke into controlled panic. Stations double-checked, uniforms straightened, staff moving through the lounge with sudden purpose that hadn't existed in the room 10 seconds earlier. Farah stood in the middle of it, her tablet gripped tight, her face working through something complicated. Dayton. She knew the name. Everyone knew the name. The company had his family's name stitched into the leather of every seat cushion on every jet. She'd known that. She just hadn't put it together yet, the thought refusing to finish itself in her mind. At 8:47 a.m., a black sedan pulled up to the front entrance, a driver stepping out to open the rear door. Marcus stepped onto the pavement in a charcoal jacket, fitted slacks, the same calm face from the day before in a completely different context. Desmond was already there. "Mr. Dayton, welcome back, sir." Marcus nodded and walked through the lobby slowly, taking it all in, stopping outside the VIP lounge entrance. Farah stood 20 feet away. She saw him. Her tablet slipped from her fingers and hit the floor. Nobody moved to pick it up. She didn't move at all, her face cycling through recognition, confusion, understanding, and finally something that looked like the floor opening beneath her. Priya, standing near the front desk, watched Farah's face fall and felt the air in the room change entirely. Marcus walked toward Farah and stopped in front of her. The lounge had gone quiet in a different way now, the hell-breath quiet of people who sense something is about to happen. "Good morning," he said. Farah's mouth opened. Nothing came out. He tilted his head slightly. "I believe you told me yesterday I wasn't suited for this place," he said. Her eyes dropped to the floor. "Look at me," he said, not loud, not cruel, just direct. She looked up. "Do you want to explain to the staff what happened, or should I?" he asked. The silence stretched. "I made a mistake," she said finally, her voice barely there. "You made a judgment," he said, "based on what I was wearing, and when I told you that directly, you had me removed. Did you do that because it was me specifically, or is that how you treat anyone who walks in here not looking wealthy enough?" "I don't know," she said, and somehow that was worse than a lie would have been. Marcus turned to the staff gathered in a loose semicircle. Desmond, 3 lounge attendants, 2 front desk agents, a maintenance supervisor, all watching, all silent, waiting to hear what would happen next. "Whoever walks through that door, whoever they are," he said, "they get treated the same. I don't care what they're wearing. I don't care how they got here." He paused. "That's not just policy. That's the reason this company exists at all." Nobody spoke. He looked back at Farah. "You've managed this lounge for 4 years, he said. "Yes, sir." "And in 4 years you turned what should be the best part of someone's morning into the worst part of mine." There was, underneath Farah's decision, that morning, one detail that complicated her, as a person rather than a villain. She had spent the 2 years before Redline working the counter at a regional airline, where a supervisor had docked her pay repeatedly for letting the wrong kind of passenger linger too long in the wrong seating area, writing her up twice for exactly the kind of leniency Marcus was now asking her to have shown him, and she had absorbed, without ever quite examining it, the lesson that her own job security depended entirely on how effectively she policed exactly this kind of boundary, that mercy shown to the wrong person on the wrong day could cost her everything she'd built. It didn't excuse the judgment she'd made about Marcus. It only meant that somewhere underneath the tablet and the tailored blazer was a woman who had learned, the hard way, that this particular cruelty was simply what the job required of her, and had never once been given a reason to question whether that lesson had been true in the first place. "I'm removing you from lounge management," Marcus said. "Effective today. You'll be reassigned to logistics and scheduling support. I'm not firing you. I'm giving you the chance I didn't have yesterday. Use it better than I did." Farah nodded slowly, her mouth pressed into a line. She picked her tablet up off the floor, turned, and walked away, without looking at anyone. Marcus turned toward the front desk. "Priya," he said. She straightened instantly. "You came outside yesterday," he said. "Yes, sir." "Why?" She hesitated. "Because what happened was wrong, and I didn't want the last thing you experienced here to be that." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. "How long have you been here?" he asked. 5 months, she said. "In 5 months you understood something a 4-year manager didn't," he said. He glanced at Desmond, then back at Priya. "I want you shadowing Desmond for the next 30 days, full operations, every department." Priya blinked. "Sir, if what I saw yesterday is accurate," he said, "you'll be ready for more after that." 3 weeks passed. The terminal changed, not the way a place changes when new furniture arrives, but the way a room changes when the light in it finally gets fixed, subtle but real, the kind of thing you only notice if you'd seen the room before. Staff smiled differently now, less the practiced customer service smile, and more the actual kind. A client who'd flown out of 6 different private terminals that year left a review online noting that red line was the only one where she'd felt like a person rather than a transaction. Farah worked quietly in logistics, keeping to herself, no complaints, no excuses. Some mornings Priya would see her through the office window, head down, focused, doing the work, without the audience she used to need. Something was shifting in her, or maybe it had always been there, buried under years of needing to prove she belonged in rooms that had convinced her belonging required a performance. 4 days after the confrontation, Farah started talking to Reggie Purnell, who'd worked maintenance and ground logistics for 6 years, knew every system in the building down to the override codes reserved for genuine facility emergencies, and knew how to stay off anyone's radar while doing it. She found him in the break room late one night, the vending machine humming behind them, the rest of the terminal quiet. "I need something to go wrong," she said quietly. "Not dangerous, not illegal, just wrong, and I needed to look like it happened because someone didn't do their job." Reggie set his coffee down slowly, studying her face for a long moment. "Someone like who?" he asked. She said the name. He was quiet a moment, then nodded, the decision settling over his face like something he'd already half expected. The problem started the following Tuesday. Redline was scheduling a coordinated departure for 2 separate VIP clients, a media executive and a competing acquisitions rival who'd spent the past year locked in a public bidding war over the same regional broadcast license, both requesting the same private departure lounge specifically to avoid the other, a detail both parties had made explicit in writing weeks earlier. Priya had personally confirmed both bookings, checked the separation windows twice, and walked the schedule board at 9 a.m., and again at noon, satisfied both times that the timing left a comfortable 90-minute buffer between them. At 1:40, both clients arrived, within 4 minutes of each other, funneled into the same lounge by a scheduling change nobody could immediately explain, and the confrontation that followed made it into 3 different industry newsletters before either plane had even left the ground, costing Redline a standing charter contract worth more than the terminal's annual maintenance budget. Priya went to the scheduling terminal that afternoon and pulled the change log, her hands steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. It showed a departure lounge reassignment entered at 11:52 a.m. Under a maintenance override code, a code that should only have existed for genuine facility issues. She checked the physical logbook. No maintenance issue had been reported in that lounge all week. Someone had manually rerouted both clients into collision and covered it with a code designed to look procedural rather than deliberate. Marcus called Priya to his office that evening. The room was quiet and minimal, a desk, 2 chairs, a view of the front range, through floor-to-ceiling glass going dark, with evening, the last light catching the snow on the peaks, before fading entirely. He didn't sit. "Tell me what happened," he said. She told him everything, the timeline, the override code, the discrepancies she couldn't explain. "Did you check the schedule yourself that morning?" he asked. "Yes," she said, "and everything was correct." "Everything was correct," he repeated, looking at her for a long moment, not angry, just thinking. "Okay," he finally said. "Go home. Come back tomorrow." The second incident happened 5 days later. A client's watch went missing from the VIP holding suite, a limited edition piece worth close to $40,000. The client connected enough that within an hour the situation had moved from a lost item report toward a formal police inquiry, phone calls already being routed to Marcus directly. Priya was overseeing that section of the terminal that week. Marcus brought in a security consultant to pull the surveillance footage. It showed a staff member entering the suite during the cleaning window, face angled away from the camera, the resolution poor, but usable once the consultant zoomed in frame by frame. On the staff member's left wrist, visible for less than 2 seconds, a distinctive silver bangle, with a small enamel inlay Priya recognized immediately, the same one Farah wore every day without fail. The meeting happened in the same conference room, where Desmond had first announced Marcus's visit 3 weeks earlier. A small group this time: Desmond, The head of security, Priya, and Farah, the chairs arranged in a loose circle rather than the long row they'd formed for the all-staff meeting. Marcus placed a printed still from the footage at the center of the table, the wrist, the bangle. This was taken at 3:14 p.m. Thursday, he said, during the cleaning window in the VIP suite. Silence. He looked at Farah. She was staring at the photograph, her jaw set, her hands flat on the table. The bangle in this image has a specific enamel pattern, he said. I've seen it on exactly one person in this building. Farah, he said, do you want to tell me what's on your wrist right now? She didn't move for 3 full seconds. Then she placed her left hand on the table. The bangle was there. Priya closed her eyes. The head of security exhaled slowly. Farah looked at Marcus, and her face was the face of someone who had been running and just ran out of road. I didn't steal it, she said, her voice steady but thin. I took it. I was going to put it back. She stopped, started again. I wanted something to go wrong for her, she said, meaning Priya. I wanted you to question whether she was actually ready for any of this. The scheduling collision, Marcus said. That was you too. She nodded once. Why? Priya asked, the words slipping out before she'd decided to speak. Farah looked at her. Something moved across her face, a flicker of something almost like recognition. Because that was supposed to be my job, she said, her voice breaking on the last word. I built that lounge. I trained half the staff in that building. And in one single morning, I went from manager to invisible. I couldn't accept that someone else was standing where I was supposed to be standing. Marcus stood. You sabotaged a contract that would have supported this company for years, he said. You stole from a client, and you did both to destroy someone who did nothing to you except show up and do the job well, day after day, without ever once asking for the recognition you felt you'd been denied. Farah said nothing. The morning I was walked out of this lounge, he said, I had a choice. I could have come back the next day and dismantled everything you'd built here. I didn't. I gave you a path forward. He paused. You chose a different one. Your employment is terminated effective immediately, he said. I'll be contacting the client about the watch personally. We won't involve the police, but that's the only courtesy this situation gets. Farah stood slowly, picked nothing up from the table, and looked at Priya once, before she left, something in her expression that wasn't quite anger, closer to relief, as though the weight of maintaining the lie had finally been set down for good. Then she walked out. Nobody spoke for a long time after the door closed. 2 months later, Redline Aviation's culture survey, an internal process Marcus had quietly commissioned the same week he'd reinstated the walkthrough practice company-wide, came back with the highest satisfaction scores the company had recorded in its 14-year history, staff reporting for the first time that mistakes felt survivable rather than career-ending. That questioning a senior colleague's decision no longer felt like professional suicide. Desmond forwarded the results to Marcus with a single line attached, worth the disruption, and Marcus kept that email longer than most of the ones that crossed his desk that quarter. Priya completed her 30 days shadowing Desmond and was offered a permanent position in operations leadership, a role she'd earned through a process the whole company could verify rather than one handed to her quietly in a back office, spending her first month in the new role rewriting the walk-in greeting protocol, so that no future employee's 5 months of tenure would ever again feel like too little standing to speak up. Marcus never repeated his walkthrough in the same disguise twice, understanding now that even the best tests eventually become predictable if a company learns to watch for them, and started instead building smaller, quieter checks into the culture itself, ones that didn't depend on him showing up unannounced in a plain t-shirt to catch what should have simply been true every single day regardless of who was watching. Narrator reflection. The part one keeps sitting with is that Marcus gave Farah a real second chance, and she used it to build something worse than the original offense. That's the detail that complicates the whole story for me. It would be simpler if mercy always worked, if every person handed a genuine path forward took it. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has documented for years how appearance-based discrimination rarely announces itself as policy. It shows up as a judgment call, a manager deciding in 3 seconds who counts as suitable for a space, a decision nobody above her had ever thought to examine. until someone with the power to examine it happened to be standing on the receiving end of it. What I keep turning over is Farah's own explanation, that she'd learned, at a previous job, that leniency toward the wrong person could cost her everything. That's not an excuse. But it's a reminder that cruelty dressed up as professionalism usually has a history behind it, some other room, where someone taught it to be afraid first. Marcus tested his own company and found the flaw. What he couldn't test, no matter how carefully he designed the walkthrough, was what a person does with a genuine second chance once nobody's watching for that either. So here's what I keep asking. If you were given the exact chance Farah was given, an honest reset, with no audience and no punishment attached, what would you actually do with it?